Jeff, what's going on, man? Welcome to the
Not
Dad
much.
Edge.
How are you?
I'm good, man. How have you been?
I've been very well. Thank you, sir.
That's good, man.
I
Yeah,
think
so
it's been a couple of years since we talked.
probably I think it has. I mean, judging by that hat, that's one of our older hats.
It is. It
It's got to
is.
be. It's got to be a couple of years now.
It was my beautiful 90-day gift.
That's right. Yeah, when you're in the Dad Edge Alliance. Well, I mean, the cool thing about it is though is you're off inspiring young teenagers, young adults even helping them find their way, which is drastically different from what you were doing. And so I would love to just give the audience some context on number one, what is it you do for a living, but also, what does your family look like?
Oh man. Well, let's start with the family because that's the most important.
Right.
I'm still married to Tammy. Of this year will be 17 years, which is awesome. And then my son Deuce, he's 14, so he's active in football, and my daughter's 12. She plays volleyball, and so as you well know, with sports, I only have two, so that keeps me extremely busy. So I can only imagine how much busier you might be with that. But that's my lifeblood. Is everything that I do now is 100% connected with them, and they're the priority that I have. And then what I'm doing now for a living. So in 2021, I was laid off from my corporate job, and so just made the decision. Just felt pulled and heard God's call to do coaching. I've always wanted to do coaching. We talked about it when I was last on with my book. And then this time it's just different. It's different in the sense of not focusing on what I've always known, the corporate world, leadership, training, sales, but a huge focus on teens and young adults is the big focus. So I'm the one of the co-founders with Hi-Lite Coaching and Consulting.
Mm. Well, so it's a very interesting. So when we booked you on the show, I went and looked at the website and I was like, wow, this is definitely a niche that in my mind, I mean, I've never really researched it to be honest with you. And I mean, the story I'm telling myself is like, man, this is like the number one, there's got to be a huge need for it. Number two, it's probably there's far and few between people even providing it. And I know we're going to get into that. Just to add some context for the audience a little bit though. So 17 years of marriage. I would love for you to tell the young bucks who listen to the show who maybe haven't been married even in double digit years or maybe even close to 17 years. What's one or two things that have been the secret to success for 17 years of matrimony for you, man?
I would say humility. And the biggest thing for me didn't happen at the beginning. It happened about 5 years ago of just being 100% open and honest and letting it all hang out. For me, it came to just a head where I just couldn't keep everything that I had kept in for the past 45 years. And finally, one evening, sat on the couch and it just all came out. And the fear that she was going to run away didn't come true. She looked at me and was like, okay, I'm still here. We're in this thing together. And that moment changed my life. So if it's a young person that's married and they're going into it, is really have that confidant, be equally yoked, know that you're both on the same mission, and don't hold anything back. You just got to be fully committed because she deserves it and you do too. And that's just, it set me free, really.
Wow. So, and really none of the things you feared being that honest. I'd love to know, but can you share any of the things that were on your mind? I mean, I'm sure there's personal things you won't, but anything
Yeah,
that you were just like, man, that seemed like a big deal at the time, but maybe it wasn't as big as I thought.
I would say 75% of it was. And for me, it was a lot of just stuff that I'd carried through my childhood. It was the just like self-esteem issues. It was, things that I thought I should be embarrassed about. But again, being a part of the Dad's Edge and doing a lot of self-work, realizing that we all encounter the same thing. And it was just an accumulation of things that I had done even prior to being married to her, that I was just carrying with me from adolescence all the way until adulthood. Again, it's all the challenges that guys face. It was pornography, too much drinking, and bad decisions, and just one thing after another where I just felt bad about myself. And I look back at pictures And you posted something like this the other day, as you look and there's a smile on your face. Well, you know, when you look at that picture, that is a fake smile. And I got tired of just trying to fool myself. And that's what got down to it, is that I was just done with that. And now, man, I would not change anything of what's happened over the last 5 years, because it's just this freedom that has just been given to me that I didn't accept before. And I look back and I'm just so thankful that she's so wonderful, that she endured all that, that I didn't give her 100% like I should have from day one.
Mm. Lessons learned, man. Humility, right? Which is huge. What about you've got a teenage son, you have a tween daughter. You're in the teenage years now. This is what I've seen come up a lot with guys in our community is that when they are raising the kids that so like right now I have, 9 and 7. So my mind operates a little bit differently now that I have teens. And luckily, like I think because of dad edge, I was able to get in front of a lot of things that could have maybe become a potential issue when they were teens. But learning from people who are ahead of me, I was able to, I'm guessing, head those off at the pass because my two older boys are just, they're really fantastic young men. But I raised my 7 and 9-year-old, similar but different as well. Like now knowing what I know now. So for you, what advice can you give guys who are a little bit earlier in the stages? They're raising those, babies, or they're raising kids in 5 to 8 years old or whatever. What can you share with them to get them ready for maybe the tween and teen years?
Patience. But I mean, we laugh, but it's 100% true. Is I would say patience, empathy, is you cannot forget. It's hard to remember how it was to be 9, 10, 12, 13, 15, because we all say, I don't remember being that bad. Or I don't remember making stupid decisions like that. I hate to break it to you. You were that bad and you made those stupid decisions. It might not have been the same, but we cast too many adult expectations on adolescents. They're just not there. They're physically, their brain is not developed like ours, so they can't see reality. That's been my hardest struggle, is to, you sit back, and I've had conversations with my son, is that I just want to protect you from the mistakes that I made. So it comes from a genuine place, but I have to approach him differently than if you and I were in a mentorship relationship and you were talking to me, even if you're 3 years ahead of me, of, okay, Jeff, here's the deal. You've got to avoid this, because we're able to process the information different. So when you're a dad talking to a child, you cannot, even if they're 16 or 17, you cannot talk to them exactly like you do in another adult. They don't process information the same. So that's where setting the expectation up front and starting earlier in life creates more opportunity for them to hear you as they get older. So just like you've learned with your older two, and you learned how to talk to them differently than the way you were spoken to. Now, after learning from them, because you're very self-aware, you now talk differently to your 9 and 7. And you'll talk to your 7-year-old different than your 9-year-old as he continues to get older.
So true. So true. I think a lot of people, they kind of freeze frame whatever season they're in, and for some reason think like, well, this is the way it's always going to be. My wife and I were just, I don't know if you guys have ever done that, but my wife and I do that. Like the season that we're in right now, we have teenage boys and then these little guys, we call them the bigs and the littles. And I looked at her the other day and I was like, do you ever just get the thought, and even though we know it's not true, that we've been in this season forever now and we'll always be here? And she's like, oh my God, I was like literally thinking the exact same thing like last week. And it's pretty fascinating, that is absolutely not true. You always got to be looking out on the horizon for the next chapter that's coming and the one that's closing. So I want to segue into this area of life with our kids, and I want to preface it with even a few challenges that we've seen in our community and on the podcast. I can't remember which show it was, but I just did an intro for it, and the premise was the generation of fathers, so the father, the dads that you and I are now, and everybody who surrounds us, we're up against things that have never been a part of any other generation. And I'm sure every generation has said that. But if you look at just technology alone, and the window to the world that's in the palm of our kids' hands, depending on the age of your kids and if they have a device or not, but we're raising them in this TikTok, YouTube, social media, cyberspace, virtual reality type thing that no other generation has raised kids in. And it's freaking scary, man. Like, and the last thing I'll say about this is that I remember, well, I don't remember it, but I remember seeing a documentary about tobacco use and when cigarettes first came out, and like how there were pictures of physicians and doctors on the cover of like Time magazine and Life, and like, hey, your doctor smokes Marlboro Reds, so should you. And you're like, oh my God, like we wouldn't even think that that's even remotely healthy at this point. So I'm wondering what the impact of all this is going to be, 20, 30 years from now, where our kids and us and all, like we were just in this bubble in this society where things were moving so fast and we never really saw it. And we're trying to raise kids in this environment. So I think it's fascinating, the people that you help and probably why. But I just want to get your vibe on that, your response on that.
Yeah, it's again, as a parent with a 14 and a 12-year-old, the struggle is real every single day. I fail at keeping them protected from their phone and keeping, I have all the downtimes, the screen times, and all these different things that it does create challenges. And what I loved what you said earlier is that, every generation has the same conversation that before, like my dad, the worst thing that they did in school was chew gum and put it underneath the table and maybe like go outside and smoke cigarettes. And what has constant throughout time is the importance of the adolescent time period. If you look back at your life, many of your fondest memories are when you were in high school. What's your favorite music? It's probably what you listened to
Pearl
during high
Jam.
school. Yeah. What you talk to all these athletes that have won at the world level and at the, national level, and you ask them, what's the most special championship you had? Most of them say their high school championship. So they're critical years that in some instances with some of these adolescents are being lost due to just the mind-numbing effects that is physiologically happening to them with this constant fast edit, short. It's impacted my attention span. Is that if I look at something like 6 minutes, I'm not going to listen to that. And the kids are the same way. They don't even finish a 6-minute video. You'll watch them and they'll skip to another YouTube because they've been conditioned since Twitter. It's like 144 characters. I know it's more than that now, but now it's that TikTok 90 seconds. It's like your brain now is in that time frame. So as a parent, we have to grow with technology and we have to move with technology. Is how do we make that connection faster and have more impact? So we need to learn from what the technology that's taking over and take our families back over and be able to accomplish those, because we're facing generational challenges. Is when I look at growing up, I grew up a fat kid. Well, it was finish all your food on your plate. Where'd that come from? The Depression days, because they didn't have any food. So my grandparents were conditioned to, you finish everything that's on your plate because I don't know when you're going to get to eat again. So then you go to my parents, it's eat all your food, finish your plate. And then as a dad, I finished my food and I would see my kids' food and I would grab the chicken fingers off of their plate because I was like, I can't leave food on the plate. It's just terrible. Well, I'm conditioned that way. And those things are passed down. And that's what we have to really be careful of, is can we break the cycle as technology continues to advances and you have the Oculus and you have, all the VR that's happening. Is, are they all of a sudden going to get sucked into that world where they have a whole world and they're sitting in a chair and it's become the Wall-E world from the movie?
Yeah, isn't it? I remember that. I was actually just thinking of that not too long ago where they're just circling and they don't even, it's almost like they don't even know that there are actual people around them because they're so in their screens. We were just on spring break at a water park, indoor water park. And there were people, kids and parents walking around the pools and getting in the lines for the slides with their phone in their hands. And I'm like, how can you be walking around with your phone at a water park? Like, and then they would just stuff it into like a waterproof case as they went down slides and stuff like that. I was like, that is crazy stuff, man. Um, what have you found that is some of the clients that come and work with your training as far as like these teenagers and these even young adults of just some of the things that they are up against?
I mean, the list is it's usually pretty obvious. A lot of it is just they lack identity and they don't know how to give themselves an identity. So they project it and then they also, and I'm not a therapist. I just want to go out on make sure that everybody knows I'm not a therapist. I'm not a counselor. I'm just a dad and a concerned citizen. And I see a lot of them just they want to know who they are. And that's the problem with bullying and a lot of the challenges that these kids are facing. They don't know who they are. They don't know how to figure that out. And then all of a sudden, somebody comes and challenges that, and there's no confidence in who they are. So, next thing you know, is they're in a really tragic place. It's real. And, you know, some of the bullying is just, it's freaky how just malicious and it's not even violent. It's just psychologically damaging. And so, one of the things that when you encounter that, and what we've seen is significant impact of just sitting down and having the student, the young person, identify their values. And so we walk them through a values exercise where they have a whole sheet. They cross off the ones that don't resonate. Then they find 10 to 15 that mean a little bit more to them. And then they narrow it down to 5. And then we talk about their 5 values. And they can change. Again, if you're not maturing and your values aren't changing, you probably aren't maturing. And so for me, it's really fun to see them, their shoulders throw back a little bit. They sit up a little higher in the chair when they say, these are my values. And then you say, okay, well, what does fun mean to you? And then them going through that and allowing them to think big and to have a voice. And so once they assign those, we have them write down and they need to share those with other people. Is there's a new confidence. We've seen people be like come into the program just painfully shy, just to the point where almost tears just to be in a group. And by the end of the group, they're leading the group. They've connected with the other people in the group, and it's wonderful to see them stand their own identity and have a confidence. And as we all know, confidence just people flock to that. And so now they're starting to build a good, safe circle around them of good people that align to their values. And, you know, as a dad and as a grown man, how many times have we not known our values and then we ended up in the wrong crowd that didn't reflect our values? And then once you start to do an audit, you go, well, shoot, this is definitely the wrong circle. I need to find another circle. And then once you define those, then you find the circle. Next thing you know is your life leveling up and you're starting to do better.
That makes so much sense. You know, the core values is something that is so overlooked. And I think a lot of people don't even really understand how those operate within us. And the best way I've always learned or I've seen it happen is I don't know what it is about this, but it doesn't feel right. Or I don't know what it is about this, but it feels really awesome. Like it's more like this intuitional intelligence that's linked to our core values. And but I think a lot of young people, they if they don't know that, like I remember I would have that intuition as a kid, depending on whatever environment that I was in or who I was around, but I could never put a finger on it. I just knew something felt right or it didn't. And I, th- I think about my own life and I think about even the lives of my kids because we talk about core values with our boys a lot. Is that man? You need to listen to those. That's your moral compass talking to you, right? That is the deepest part of who you are. and it's trying to steer you either in the direction to keep going or to stop and pivot. But think about for a moment what our lives would be like if we knew that from an earlier age. And
Sure.
that's one of the questions I would love to ask you. Like, what are some of the things that what are some of the aha moment examples that you've seen with some of these young kids that when they do something like this, they're like, "Oh, wait, so this now makes sense to me."
Well, it goes exactly what you said is when you define your values, it sets your compass. And all of your, we challenge everybody, adults or young people, every decision needs to be weighed against their values. So again, integrity. This is something that I use personally for myself is integrity is really high for me. So integrity is doing the right thing when nobody's looking. So, and I use this example with the teens that I'm with is think about a time when somebody shares with you like a free code that somebody bought and they pass that on to somebody else, but it was to a paid site, but like, here's my password, use that. And so I go, so what do you think about that? Well, I get it for free. Is it stealing? Well, no. I go, wait a minute. There's value attached to that. And you just got that from somebody else and you didn't pay for it and neither did they. So when there's specific instruction of everybody needs to pay, how is that not stealing? And again, even adults think that. And you were saying something earlier is without them, you start to negotiate with your values. But if you really have your values set in stone, you won't negotiate against them. I was talking to another friend and he called me specifically. He's like, I got to call somebody that would appreciate this. His daughter was getting on the bus. We're supposed to go on the bus and they pay to get on the school bus because they use municipal buses. And so the girl's like, nobody even looks. So just get on with me or you can use my card. She's like, no, that's stealing. And the girl's like, no, just get on. We need to go. And she's like, no, I'm not going to get on the bus. It's stealing. So her friends were aggravated and they left her and she called her dad and he rewarded her for having integrity. Like she hadn't defined him, but like you said earlier, she knew in her mind, if I do that, that's going against my values. And just think how great this world would be. And for me personally, how much better decisions I would have made if I would have measured every little thing. Well, nobody's looking. I can do that. Nobody's home. I can do that. How many different decisions I would have made? A ton.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Um, what have you found has been really in the way of people getting clarity of what they want to do with their lives?
Structure. I don't think from what I've seen in people that have not known, and then all of a sudden you create a vision, you create a plan, is you see a whole different avenue of where to go. So you start with the values. Okay, if you're going to go towards this, does this follow in line with your values? So that's the first measuring stick. And then how are you going to accomplish it? And so many times, I know for me, I'll just use me as a personal example. I made it. I don't know how, but I made it. And if I would have had structure, even basic structure of goals and how to accomplish a goal and how to really challenge myself, again, it can be very simple. I would have accomplished more sooner because I wouldn't have put so much blame and responsibility on somebody else's helping me with my success. Because a big thing I like to say is you don't delegate your self-development. It's called self-development for a reason. And you have so many people in this day and age, they just want everything given to them. It's that Amazon that's like, I just want to hit a button and then within 6 hours, it's going to be on my doorstep. And it's the same thing with their goals in life. They feel like they deserve it. We don't deserve anything. You earn it. You work hard for it. Now, how do you do it? And once you start to teach people early how to have small wins that they can be excited about, that creates massive momentum that turns into more than they can ever imagine. Think about your son accomplishing what he did during the bodybuilding. That changed him forever. He'll never be the same young man if he hadn't have accomplished that. because he did a lot of work, a lot of effort that changed him as an adult. And when he's 60, he'll look back and remember that's a pivotal point in my life that changed me.
Yeah, excuse me. The structure aspect, what I've noticed even with our four boys, is they thrive in structure. Like they absolutely thrive in it. It's like, even yesterday, I have my 16-year-old, he's gonna be 17 actually at the end of this week. And, he's got a biology test next Friday. And we were just coming off spring break. And, he was kind of like vegging out on his phone a little bit. And we have we have time on their phone, which means like we shut their apps down, or they automatically shut down after so much time. And I looked at him and I said, "Hey man," I said, "You've got that biology test on Friday, right?" And he's like, "Yeah." I was like, "Well," I was like, "It's 11:30 a.m. right now." I was like, "You have your driver." He's taking driver's ed right now. I was like, "You got driver's ed at 2:30. You have this 3-hour window." I was like, what are things that you need to have done before tomorrow?" And this was like school. He's like, "I've got to do some laundry. I've got to finish up one assignment. And I do have to get some biology studying in." I was like, "Okay, when are you going to do that?" And he's like, "I don't know." And I was like, "Well, can we both agree that probably 3 hours of time is going to fly by and you're not going to realize it?" He's like, "Yeah, that's probably accurate." And I go, "What would it feel like if you were to create a schedule for yourself today in between now and 2:30 and you had everything accomplished?" He's like, "That would be amazing." I was like, "Why don't you go ahead and plan that out and text it over to me when you're done?" Because I had to leave anyway. I take my little guy to out yesterday, and within 15 minutes, he had mapped out exactly what he was going to do when he was going to do it. And then when I saw him later on last night, he was just like, "I got everything done." Like he was so fulfilled. "I got everything done," and he couldn't wait to tell me. But sometimes I think as parents, we feel like we're being, like hard asses, or we're being like maybe anal retentive. Like, hey, like, but I think if you're helping them create structure and boundaries, like that's part of what we should be doing, right? Well, I don't think we should do it for them, but I think we give them the guide rails, right? Um, as far as I think about, I think about what it would have been like if I would have had guidance like that as a teenager, like how differently maybe my life would have turned out, even maybe even in my 20s and 30s and stuff like that. But what would you have to say to the guys? And you're raising your own kids now, probably within these parameters, but explain the gift of being able to give your kids this guidance.
Yeah, there's a wonderful quote. It talks about that coaches use a lot, and this falls in line with parents as well, is helping those who you once were. And that's parenting. It's figuring out and really being self-aware. And that's what I love about your audience is these men are self-aware. They're doing the work on themselves. So then the next question would be is the same thing that you just asked me is what would you have wanted when you were younger? Not the stuff, not the things that, oh, I wish I would have done that, but what are the skills that you wish someone would have taught you earlier? And so for me, it's discipline. It's doing hard things because they're hard, because then I've done them and they're out of the way. And it's then coaching and not expecting our kids just to know. So, like you said, so many of us, we get busy, we're frustrated, we're tired. We don't want to spend the 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 5 minutes to have that conversation with our child, to be able to explain the list, the importance of a list, having them work through that. And you're going to have to do it every day until he's 20, because just the way their brain works is at some point they'll understand that. But being a parent's not easy and it doesn't end. And if you can pay that backwards and look at it this way, is ask yourself 3 questions in the sense of what are 3 things that you would have told yourself when you were 15 or 16 that would have made you better off. That's what you need to teach your kids. So if there's anything, and most people, so I'll ask you that question. If you could ask yourself or tell yourself 3 things when you were a teenager to do, what would they be?
So you're asking me, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm putting you on the
Ah,
spot.
yes. I don't
This
know if
is
I
your
could.
podcast.
Yeah, man. I don't know if I could actually narrow it down to three. But
What's the first three that come
yeah,
to mind?
here's what I'll tell you. This is what I would have told. This is one thing I would have told myself. Your success is not dependent on your grades. Now, that might cause some controversy with people, but I'll give some context. I went to school. I went, even my high school, I went to an all boys Catholic college prep, high school that I really, be quite honest, I shouldn't have gone to. I only got, I was a C student in grade school, failed the eighth grade. Actually, I do eighth grade twice, made decent enough grades to somehow a miracle to get into this high school. And I went on to high school, and I was an average student in this high school. And I had, people that were straight A students that didn't do jack with their life, right? That, our valedictorian got caught or dropped out of college freshman year because it was his first taste of being away from school, smoked weed, didn't go to class, and failed. So, I don't think grades, and I tell my boys this, I was like, grades are not a reflection of how smart and brilliant you are. They're a reflection of what you're learning in that subject and how well you can retain it. Right. However, the one of the cool things that, and I don't really buy into, I don't like the current day school system because it hasn't been updated in like 100 years. One thing it does it teaches you how to problem solve, and it teaches you how to think. Um, I wouldn't say to the best of your ability, but it teaches you work ethic. Like you have to work, to get good grades. And I always tell my kids, I was like, your assignment, view it like this. When you have a job and your boss asks you for a report, that's an assignment. If you own your own business and you have a deliverable to a customer, that's an assignment. So you're never going to get away from homework, right? And these assignment is the same thing as your word. I'm going to complete this to the best of my ability because that's who I am, right? Not necessarily because it's just for a grade. So I would definitely say that. Here's another piece of advice that I would give, and that is dare to be a stallion among the donkeys.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're a kid, you're surrounded by them, right? And I would say, and no, I'm not saying be better, like, oh, I'm so much better than everybody else. That's not what I'm saying. But stallions operate differently. They sleep longer. They run differently, right? They're a different animal than the donkey is, right? Again, not better or worse, but it's not where I want to be. So what I mean by that is when the rest of your knucklehead friends are doing things like ding dong ditch and throwing things at cars and smoking weed and vaping and all this other stuff, and you have a dream to go in the NFL, well, you got a decision to make. Is this a stallion or is this a donkey? Which one am I going to do? So that's another piece of advice I would have given myself. Dare to be a stallion among the donkeys because the world's full of donkeys. The third would be, the third would be, to be honest, I think if I was younger, I would always say, be daring enough to take a risk on yourself as
Mm-hmm.
a business owner, right? Be willing and don't necessarily do it for the money. Do it because you want to bring value to other people and solve problems. My 9-year-old, of all people, asked me, he's like, Dad, how do you make money at business? And I was like, what do you mean? And I loved the question. I was just like, he's 9. He just turned 9. I was like, well, what do you mean? He's like, well, how do you make money at Dad Edge? He's like, I understand, like when we go to Chick-fil-A, the person taking our order, like they get paid per hour to do that. But how do you make money? And I was like, every business makes money because they do one thing. They solve a problem. I was like, men pay me because I help them with marriage. I help them communicate with their wives. I help them have more patience with their kids. I help them be a better leader in their home. They're facing problems. The rest of the world, is telling these men that they can't do these things or they shouldn't do these things, and we're solving that problem. I was like, think of it when you had your lemonade stand. You were bringing value to somebody else who's thirsty. You were solving their problem of thirst. I was like, so dare to really step into at least trying to be a business owner and do it from a standpoint of you want to solve somebody else's problem, make their life better, and give them something of value that they didn't have before they came across you. And that's the I guess that's the three pieces of advice. If I had to narrow it down to just three, that would be three.
Yeah, and that's such a critical thing. And so I appreciate you sharing that because that's what men need to do. They need to ask themselves that question and then talk to their kids, share those same things over and over and over, and share it not from a position of authority, but from a position of empathy and love and caring, of saying those things that will resonate because now they feel you say it, they feel you believe it. And it's okay to be emotional in front of your kids if it's that important to you that you would go back in time and tell yourself those three things. So that's the biggest challenge that I want to give the men and the women. I know there are women that listen to this, but there's the parents that listen to this that do that exercise and continue to challenge them to be further ahead than you are now, because if you can create 10 to 15 years of more healthy productivity, imagine where you would be.
God, that is so true, man. You know, it's so fascinating as you just put me through that exercise. And as I shared it, it didn't come from a place of telling. It really didn't. There was a part of me that got kind of like even, somewhat it pulled on my heartstrings, like this emotional tie to it. Like I wasn't lecturing, I wasn't telling. I was saying it because like for the love of God, I really wish somebody would have told me that, like growing up. It probably would have saved me a whole lot of heartache, confusion, and all that, and I think that that's a beautiful way to allow the men who listen to this show, your show right now, to reflect on those things. And what are the gifts that you wish someone would have given you and you now have the opportunity to give that to your kid, right? I mean, I'm thinking of my boys right now, like 14 and I'm sorry, 15 and 17. And I'm sitting here thinking like if I could give them even more, they're pretty clear, but if I can give them more clarity, and a better roadmap, then yeah, I'm on board with that. I would love
Yeah.
that.
Well, and think about we ask the same question to the people, the young people that we work with. We ask them to tell themselves three pieces of advice they wish they would have known 3 years ago. Then we ask them, what are three questions you want to ask yourself 5 years from now? And that creates a really unique perspective. And then say, okay, what are you doing today to take the advice that you gave yourself before? And then how are you living to answer the question that you're going to ask yourself in 5 years?
God.
And then they just sit there and do the same thing, like, but that's it. I mean, that's that, and that doesn't matter how old you are. If you do those two things, forget it. It will challenge you on what decisions you make today.
See, I think that's incredible because guys who are our age, right? We know that there's a tremendous sense of urgency to like this is where I want to be. Is what I'm about to go do going to get me closer to that or further away? But I think when you're a young adult or a teenager, you're thinking of today. You're not thinking like, so if my 17-year-old, he's not thinking about him being 22. He's thinking about him being 17 forever, probably. But I think if we take productive pauses like that, or like what your service provides is to give them that clear roadmap. Because I mean, think about it for a minute. If you have a 15-year-old kid and you're like, hey, man, what advice would you give yourself at 15 when you're 20 right now? Like, think about that. And then to literally plant the seed of every decision that you're going to make over the next 5 years, is it going to get you closer to that or further
Mhm.
away? I mean, think of the shifts in the decision making as they go throughout those next 5 years that they might not have otherwise made because they're living for today. And I'll never be 20 because that's old, right? This is really
Yeah.
good stuff, man.
Yeah. 100%. And it's because they're incapable of thinking ahead.
Right.
It's just physiologically their frontal lobe. There's a great book that I encourage anybody that wants to listen to it. It's called The Teenage Brain. It's by Dr. Frances Jensen, and she breaks down the adolescent brain. It's I nerd out on that stuff, and it's fascinating because if we understand that, that's where the empathy can come into.
That's so cool, man. Yeah, I think sometimes we forget, you look at these teenagers as like kind of like young adults, but not really, but sort of, but they should be thinking like us, but they're not, and we don't understand why they're not, but yeah, there's definitely that gap. In the last couple of minutes here, I just want to give you some time to just share, what this is all about and how you can maybe help our guys who are raising young people, and maybe they're in a boat where like, hey, I really want to give this kid every possible chance they could have. And I'm still trying to figure this out myself as a parent, but and maybe that gap is what you guys provide.
Sure. No, thank you for this opportunity, Larry. And because it goes along with what you're doing in coaching dads. And like you said just a second ago, is fill the gap. We're not trying to take the place of a parent. We're not trying to tell you that the parent's doing wrong. Like everything that we do, we encourage is when you go through the value exercise, go have a conversation with your parents, talk to them about what your values mean. So what we're looking to do is just to really complement what parents are doing, because it is difficult. And it's just like if you sign your child up for baseball coaching on the side or volleyball coaching or whatever it is, music, just different skills that you might not be as great at, but you want to provide your child with the tools. We do one-on-one coaching, we do group coaching. Right now, our group coaching is more specific to the areas where we have coaches, but we also offer virtual coaching as well, where we go through this process, and it's a workbook. So they actually are doing work. So when they leave, they can have conversations with the parents, and they can actually see the wins, like you said, the small wins that they get. And it builds tremendous confidence in them. And what's so much fun is it changes your conversation as a parent. Again, you share this all the time, is all the learning that you've taken into place over the years, you're now feeding back to your boys. And the conversations are on a whole nother level, and you'll start to see them look at you different, not just as a parent, but as a mentor guiding you through life and trying to help you get through the obstacles. Because when they share certain things, then you can share back, and it just creates this really mutual respect between the two. And that's what our goal is that, our children are critical. And it's like the song, children are our future. And this age of adolescent and young adults, so young adults, we even define 18 to 35, because again, I know how I was at 30. I'm not anywhere close to where I needed to be. But those critical years, you can set in stone foundations of critical tactics that will last them forever.
I love that, man. Where's the best place for people to find you?
The best place, you can go to hi-litecoaching.com, and then me specifically, I'm active on Instagram, and it's Jeff and then the number 4 Esther. So it's my name. So it's Jeff 4 Esther on Instagram. Reach out. We can set up a time to have a one-on-one so I can share more about the program and see if it's a right fit for you and for your child. And then we can go from there.
Awesome, guys. Well, hey, not to worry. We'll have all the links in the show notes. All you have to do is head on over to thedadedge.com/Friday 100. Again, thedadedge.com/Friday 100 for this show. You can connect with Jeff. You can connect with his social media handles, the whole 9 yards. At the very least, gentlemen, I challenge you with this. Contemplate, what are 3 things you would advise yourself in your teenage years? Knowing what you know now. That's definitely a good litmus test. It's a good gut check of where we're at, and perhaps what we could share with our kids as well. Jeff, thanks so much for coming on, man. This was awesome.
Yeah. Appreciate you, Larry.
You bet. Gentlemen, go out, live legendary. Take care.